Better, yes. So I think we can start. So dear colleagues, welcome. Thank you for joining us for the third day of International Social Transformation Conference. My name is Julius Ruka, and I will chair a session about alternative monetary systems. And our first presentation is given by Ciaran Willow, right?
Yes, very good.
Who is speaking instead of his colleague and first author of the paper, Graham Burns, who wasn't able to come. Ciaran represents Fiesta, the organization that was originally set up as a think tank institute dealing with environmental issues, land usage, and taxation policy. Fiesta is based in Ireland, but it has an international membership. And the presentation title is The Lot of the Currency Designer. You have the floor, Ciaran.
Thank you very much. Yes, unfortunately, Graham had to attend due to family matters. And so because he was unable to attend, as a good friend of mine, when I heard the conference was in Split, I naturally volunteered to come in his place. And I was very glad to help out. Now, I just start on the title because it's the title, The Lot of the Currency Designer, is maybe a little bit confusing for people where English is not their first language. So I've really just given it an alternative title, and we talked a lot, or issues that can be addressed by the currency designer is probably a better way of trying to communicate the title. So also I'd just like to thank Jurek for his introduction. And FASTA was originally founded very much as a think tank, dealing with a number of areas, and currency is one of those areas. I'll just mention some of the people who are involved in the group slightly on in the presentation. So just once we realize that money can be designed to fulfill, once we get around the concept of money and come to the realization that money can actually be, a currency can be set to achieve specific objectives, it frees us from a lot of the current thinking that a lot of people have about money. The ability to redesign ourselves away from the existing straitjackets that are often applied by existing monetary systems. This paper describes a number of legitimate objectives for the currency, and also gives some views about the potential for cross-connecting currencies. And we also briefly look at comparison with the last heyday of complementary currencies, which is the 1930s, where there was a lot of creativity existed. And we asked the question, but have been subsequently buried. So we're just asking now, what is different this time round? The presentation aims to encourage currency advocacy and to emphasize that monetary economics is too important to be left entirely to the economists. I'd just like to make a brief acknowledgement to our founder, Richard Douthwaite, an Englishman who's been living in Ireland for 25 years and was a giant among economists, and was known to many people at this conference, and has indeed been mentioned by a number of speakers yesterday. And a lot of his work is on the FASTA website, fasta.org. And in fact, a number of these books are available online. In particular, The Ecology of Money is a seminal work on a lot of the functions of money, and again, it's a radical and free-thinking approach, to monetary design. So he died, unfortunately, at the age of 69 last year, and he's been sorely missed since then. Just a little bit on exchange currencies. This paper is mainly about exchange currency, and which is really a sort of money that exists to facilitate the exchange of goods and services. Fiat money, or fiat or debt-based currency, for example, euro and dollars, performs this function, but also it attempts to be a store of value. As has been described elsewhere, these two functions often act against each other and are satisfactory for neither objective. In this particular paper, we tend to focus on, we're giving priority to the ability to facilitate the exchange of goods and services rather than acting as a store of value. A currency can be designed to promote specific values, behaviors, or outcomes. A mainstream economist might suggest that this was not appropriate, that a currency might be neutral, and this, in fact, is a commonly held concept, and that currency should be able to facilitate any sort of exchange and incorporate no inbuilt value associations. Unfortunately, fiat money, or debt-based money, fails this test because it has been created by being lent into circulation. In other words, been created out of thin air as debt. The borrower then has to work doubly hard, if you like, to create value, to repay the loan. faster than the debt grows through compound interest. The currency is provided by those who have more than they need, or who have been given the right to mint digital money, to those who need more than they have. And the wealth thus created is a capital rent, bestowed upon the lender solely by virtue of the fact that he already has the money or the issuance rights, not because he is clever or industrious. It requires growth to repay the interest in debt. In theory, the extent of the growth implied is moderated by the level of debt default. The interest rate is theoretically an indicator of risk. The higher the debt, the more interest is payable. But more and more, as in the currency crisis, debtors are not allowed to default, even when their debt is socialized. That is picked up by the non-participants in the loan, typically the taxpayer. The lender's position is held paramount. There are a number of unfortunate aspects to this means of money creation. Its role in increasing inequality, its failure to recognize that the financialized economy is the tail wagging the real economy dog, its need for infinite growth on the planet, a point that was referred to quite well by Margaret Kennedy yesterday, and on a planet with finite resources. But while we may be generally sympathetic to these arguments, and they will certainly motivate the search for alternatives, they're not actually the subject of this paper. This paper is about currency design as a legitimate profession, and it anticipates and welcomes the emergence of an ecology of many designer currencies coexisting together. If we accept that currencies can be designed, one objective that comes to mind immediately is the need to increase liquidity. The current credit crunch is largely caused by lenders' concerns that the preferential position accorded to them by politicians may not survive the multiple banking crises and the progressive transfer of debt to its citizens and the social aftermath. Euros, certainly in the Euroland area, are getting scarcer by the day as banks scramble to improve their capital adequacy. One school of thought here focuses on self-issued credit, where the currency is essentially created by each player issuing their own IOUs, or backed by the promise of future delivery and services. This creates additional liquidity because these IOUs can be traded without the need for a debt-based currency. FASTA's approach, which was set up through a dedicated, if you like, subgroup called the Liquidity Network, is rooted in the work of the late Richard Douthwaite. Sorry. Okay. Yes. Basically, additional liquidity can be created by a currency sponsor spending or granting currency into circulation. One of the key questions that's often asked about...
remote control for the slides.
I'm sorry?
You have a remote control for the slides, so you can walk if you want to.
Oh, okay, well, I'll stick with the way I'm at, that's okay. It's hard to change me. This begs the question, what, if anything, backs the currency? Store of value currencies clearly need a form of backing. That is, they need to be exchangeable on demand into something of undeniable worth, or they can make no claim to be a store of value. Douthwaite's view was that exchange currencies, once established, need no backing. They have value by virtue of the confidence that they are widely accepted within the community of use. And indeed, arguably, one might say that euro and the main currencies exist on much the same basis. Indeed, the ability to cash in the currency, exchange it for the backing commodity, removes it from circulation and decreases the very liquidity that we wanted to create. Thus, in an established exchange currency, there needs to be a leakage inhibitor, or something that actually prevents the leakage of the currency from out of the complementary currency, something that would reduce the volume of currency in circulation. And these are mechanisms basically to control or mitigate the loss of circulating currency. In a pure, in the pure liquidity network, we would set the liquidity inhibitor to 100%, and that is that once the currency is in circulation, we would not allow any removal from the currency. And that was, I think, a point that some people claim was made about the VER currency. But probably this is impractical for many cases. In contrast, some of the complementary currencies in the United Kingdom, for example, the Brixton, Lewis and Totnes pounds, the inhibitor is only 5%, and that proxy pounds can be changed back into sterling at 95% of face value. And many critics would claim that no additional liquidity is created by this process if you allow the currency to be freely exchanged. But we believe that this might be an unfair criticism, because if nothing else, that often we found with complementary currencies that the velocity of exchange is much faster within the complementary currencies, and therefore the liquidity is going to be increased on that basis. So the whole design of the leakage inhibitor is a key part of the designer's kit bag, and this can be achieved by the exchange rate, or it can be set given a number of conditions that you impose in terms of when and how the currency can be exchanged for the original backing currency, or indeed exchanged for another complementary currency. This area of action research and analysis is central to the development of liquidity network conceptual model, because a companion currency or currencies is needed to achieve the legitimate store of value, which actually we regard as falls outside the liquidity network design criteria. We see it just purely as an exchange currency for goods and services. FASTA's thinking here is that a companion currency may well be based on energy bonds or energy linked. Douthwaite's view was that a backing for an exchange currency was much like the training wheels on a children's bicycle. It's needed to get the currency rolling, but can be discarded once the momentum of the currency has been established. The initial source of such backing for a liquidity network was envisaged to be local authority sponsorship, an acceptance of the currency and payment for local taxes and charges. And we're also looking at the moment at a number of other models, including commercially sponsored complementary currencies. One of the other an important other design objective for a complementary currency is that of relocalization. And this is really very much about trying to repair the damage that's often been done within communities by the acts of globalization. This action is engendered by the local experiences of, for example, centralized supply chains. In the EU, the whole procurement process is open to open tendering process from any country within the EU, for example. And these all break down the local supply initiatives and reduce the competitiveness of often local suppliers because they don't have the scale or volume to be able to compete properly. So the other types of issues here are of the publication of local directories. But it's really, I believe it's very much a means of trying to communicate. Probably the most important thing is communicating to the communities and instilling values in the communities of the importance of the currency, that by building the community closer together and helping to, once you educate people in the value of refocusing the currency within their community, it's oftentimes communication is the most important way of being able to achieve that. Sometimes it can be a real uphill battle to be able to get local suppliers to be able to be competitive again, to be able to compete with some of the centralized mainstream players.
You have 3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay, well, too long. One of the other things then that is very important is the whole area of behavior change. And the behavior could be pro-currency, in other words, behavior helping to promote positive behavior into the acceptance of the currency. Trying to promote, and probably the most important one is trying to promote behavior which instills in value of people trading locally within their community. And lastly, if we can set the value of specific values, and these may be ecologically friendly or types of value behavior. We can also put in a number of rewards and penalties again, these are things that we can tweak or that we can change to be able to enhance the value of the currency, the take-up of the currency. So, for example, demurrage, for example, the whole rusting of the currency. Now, we believe that while it's been successfully used in many complementary currencies, it can often become problematic in the introduction of a new and immature currency. And by the same token then, introducing demurrage in an established currency, can often cause problems in terms of the terms and conditions. Because we have to go back and renegotiate effectively the terms and conditions. Certainly one of the objectives is to try and promote the idea that some transactions are more valuable to the community than other transactions, and these are some of the things that we can try and put in as part of the currency design. I'm just going to move, just to try and keep within my time allotment to talk about it. If I just talk briefly about some of the major differences between the 1930s and the currency design today, and a number of speakers, Trond has mentioned it quite eloquently, and Jam as well, the whole power of the internet, the ability to implement currencies which are cloud-based currencies at low cost is quite effective. And the other point is that in a sense it's a cloud with a silver lining. Clearly the environmental or the currency crisis create a compelling reason for change, and one of the things that I would say is why waste a good crisis, when we can start implementing many of these things today. So I leave that now, so thank you very much.
So, how to arrange the stuff? Now we're going to move on to the draw.
Excellent.